Jason Gay has a column in the Wall Street Journal recently, a tongue-in-cheek column. The title is, "All the Fun Has Gone Out of Being a Billionaire." It's a reaction to Howard Schultz, the former Starbucks CEO, who complained that billionaires were abused these days. He doesn't like the term billionaire anymore because it's been demonized. He suggests maybe instead the term people of means. Gay says, Mr. Schultz expects that people are mad at him because he's a billionaire. Abolish billionaires, a recent New York Times op-ed declared. It's brutal, it's un-American. If we don't start being nicer to our billionaires, it's going to stifle creativity and job creation and really put a dent in the custom super luxury yacht business. What to do with all that fiberglass? Make kayaks and bathtubs? Really, it's unfair. It's to the point, I don't want to be a billionaire. Unless somebody out there wants to give me $1 billion, in that case, I'll try to tough it out. It's in the news every day, really, isn't it? Rich and poor, haves and have-nots. The day the Wall Street Journal, in its mansion section, offers over-the-top amenities for condo buyers in Florida with chauffeured Rolls Royces, indoor skating rinks, and room service at 2 o'clock. The News Argus says, homeless forced out of Tent City. There it is, day after day. Well, you'd expect the Bible to weigh in, but don't expect the Bible's weighing in to be exactly clear. Not as clear as some would like you to believe. Proverbs chapter 10, verse 22. The blessing of the Lord makes a person rich, and he adds no sorrow to it. Then, 1 John chapter 3, verse 17, rich people who see a brother or sister in need, yet close their hearts against them, cannot claim they love God. Proverbs 24. I passed by the field of one who was lazy, by the vineyard of a stupid person, and see, it was overgrown with thorns, the ground was covered with nettles, the stone wall broken down. Then I saw and considered it. I looked and received instruction, a little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest, and poverty will come upon you like a robber. And then Jesus says, I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. Proverbs 10, a slack hand causes poverty, but the hand of the diligent makes rich. The appetite of the lazy craves and gets nothing, while the appetite of the diligent is richly supplied. And then James. Suppose there are brothers or sisters who need clothes and don't have anything to eat. What good is there in saying to them, God bless you, keep warm and eat well, if you don't give them the necessities of life? You see? Many sides, many answers. Into the biblical fray weighs the Gospel of Luke. Luke's Gospel, you may remember, began with Angel Gabriel's visit to a poor peasant girl, Mary, to tell her that God has chosen her, of all people, to bear a son who will be called Son of the Most High God. And do you remember that Mary, in response to this news, sings a song that makes OAC seem tame? The Lord, Mary sings, has overthrown those in power and raised up the humble. He has satisfied the hungry with good things, but the rich he has sent empty away. Remember that Luke says Jesus' earthly life ends in the public shame and disgrace of a cross, where his executioners gamble for the sum total of his earthly estate. which is the clothes on his back. And he is laid in a charity grave. In between Luke's beginning and that ending, the rich do not fare so well in Luke's gospel. Time doesn't permit me to do today what I did on Wednesday night at the evening Bible study, which was to move chapter by chapter through the Gospel of Luke on a grand tour of the stories and sayings of Jesus that carve up the rich and speak hope for the poor. Here are some of the highlights. Jesus' inaugural sermon, I have come to preach good news to the poor and freedom to the oppressed. Jesus calls a diligent farmer who has abundant harvests that lead him to build bigger barns and plan to wine, dine, shine, and recline in retirement. Jesus calls such a man a fool. Jesus sends his followers out to country towns and villages with no provisions, no purse, no pack, no bread, no shoes, no extra clothes, no nothing, and instructs them to beg for their food. Jesus warns against the good seed that falls into the thorn patch, thorns that in the story stand for wealth and pleasures of life that choke out the gospel. Jesus sends away a rich man who wants to follow him, but cannot agree to liquidate all of his earthly possessions and give the money to the poor. He tells his followers, when you throw a party, don't invite the who's who's. Go out and beat the bushes for the who's he's, the people who can never repay you. And then he tells a downright frightening story of a rich man who dies and goes to burn in hell, while the poor beggar that lived at his gate every day that he ignored is whisked off to Abraham's side in heaven. Even Luke's most beloved story, the prodigal son, makes a hero out of the irresponsible son who squanders the father's inheritance, while the completely responsible older brother is left standing outside the party that's thrown in his wayward brother's honor. So don't you take my word for it. Go home and work your way through the Gospel of Luke. Read it for yourself. And of course, the text today, Luke's rendering of Jesus' Sermon on the Plain, is a real head-scratcher. Jesus offers 4 blessings. I've called them wows for alliteration's sake, followed by 4 woes. You have to admit they defy conventional wisdom. Here's who Jesus calls blessed: the poor, the hungry, weeping victims of oppression, and the persecuted. And here's who Jesus says are cursed: the rich, the full, happy consumers, those who are praised. Now, how do you make sense out of that? There's plenty of good reason, I think, to rename Jesus' Sermon on the Plain as the sermon I'd rather not preach. I really do have no good answer to it all. So I'll share one about this text from a hero of mine, Fred Craddock, who wrote a commentary on the Gospel of Luke. About this text, he says, "There are in it no urgings of exhortations to behave in certain ways so as to earn these blessings and avoid the curses. In fact, there's no call to action at all. Rather, Jesus is just pronouncing the facts. He is painting for us a picture of what the kingdom of God is. He's not making suggestions of how you can be happy or giving warnings of how you can keep from being miserable. Jesus is making defining statements of the way of life inside and outside the reign of God. It is a reversal of fortunes for the rich and the poor, the powerful and the powerless, the full and the empty. Being sick this week gave me time to work my way through a book that intrigued me. Stephanie Land wrote this book. It's called Made, M-A-I-D, and it's subtitled Hard Work, Low Pay, and a Mother's Will to Survive. I recommend the book to you. It's a good book. The very first sentence of the book grabs me. My daughter learned to walk in a homeless shelter. That's the first sentence. It's a complicated tale of just how this young woman ended up there, the way all tales of poverty are complicated. In fact, she remembers a time early in her life when she used to go with her parents and a church group to the park, and they would give out sandwiches to the homeless. Jesus loves you, she would say to each one as she handed them a sandwich. She remembered one man looking up at her and answering, he just seems to love you a little bit more. She remembers taking down angels from the angel tree at Christmas time, going with her mother to buy presents for the needy children represented there, carefully wrapping them, and going with her family to present the presents to the needy people. She was put off by the fact that they simply opened the door, didn't show much appreciation, gave begrudging acknowledgement. Later, she understood why. She experienced for herself the humiliation of poverty. When her family fell apart, and she, like our guest in our house, got pregnant with a child of a bad boy, her life caved in too. And as a single mother, she lost her trip to college and at one time received 7 different kinds of public assistance in order to make it by. The story of how she struggled to free herself from the prison of poverty is a compelling one. It's a harrowing tale of low-wage jobs with no benefits, of her warding off hunger with coffee so that her daughter could have enough to eat, of her driving a beater car and praying that it would not break down, of having to leave her sick child at bad daycare because she could not afford to miss work, of facing the humiliation and downgrading degradation of others who had no sympathy for her lot. Once at the grocery store, when she paid for her groceries with her EBT food stamp card, the man behind her, shuffling angrily, called out for everyone to hear, "You're welcome," as if to say, I bought those groceries. It was judgment upon me, the times I've judged others and what they bought with food stamp cards. To get by, Stephanie Land took a job as a maid for a cleaning service for wealthy clients. She supplemented her income by taking landscaping work. She worked herself weary. She was good at cleaning. She was too good, in fact. Her company ordered her to slow down, knowing that their customers would expect every cleaner to match her speed. So she began to take her time, and she got bored. Getting bored, she started to snoop. She didn't just organize the stacks of papers on the kitchen island. She started to thumb through them and read them. She found that some people were spending more for a throw for their living room couch than she had for her own car. She didn't simply put the pill bottles back in the drawers in the bathroom. She noted the prescriptions. She even counted the pills and how quickly they disappeared. She found some truths. She said the bigger the house, the more the owners had to work to keep it afloat, the more prescription bottles there would be. She discovered that so many of the houses and lives looked grand on the outside, but had degenerated on the inside into double solitaire of separate bedrooms, porn magazines, estranged lives almost desperate in their consumption of ever more expensive electronics and toys. She came to see the fact that she could not afford to buy her daughters such things was, in the end, a blessing, she says, not a curse. She says, we went to the beach instead and looked for crabs under the rocks. We spent rainy Saturdays doing a 25-cent puzzle. I vowed never to have a house bigger than I could clean myself. I wonder if this is something of what Jesus meant. That in the kingdom that is coming, and in fact, is already breaking in, the conventional wisdom about who is wealthy, about consumption and things and happiness, will all be set on its head. Maybe what Jesus is doing is calling us to see that the world as we know it and have organized and benefited from it is passing away. There is a new world coming. Things will be different. Our prized possessions and achievements and piles of money will be as useless as monopoly money and real estate titles when the game is over and all goes back in the box. I pondered all this at the airport a week and a half ago, having read these troublesome texts. As I passed through TSA security, methodically I stripped myself of my possessions, my watch, my belt, my shoes, my wallet, my keys, my change, every scrap of paper, put them in a box, and sent them away. When I stepped into the scanner that was the threshold between two worlds and raised up my arms for an x-ray, I might as well have been naked. Then it dawned on me. One day, at a different portal, before a different screening and a different scrutiny, I will be naked. Maybe it's the better part of wisdom to get ready for that new world. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit.